Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Sri Gurave Namaha. Om Ganana Antva Ganapati Gammavamahe, Kavin Kavinam Upavashravasramam, Jeshtarajam Brahmanan Brahspada, Anushrunnota Visida Sadhanam. Om Mahaganadipataye Namaha. Om Keshwaya Namaha, Om Narayana Namaha, Om Madhvaya Namaha. Om Govindaya Namaha, Om Vishnu Matsudraya Namaha, Trivikramaaya Namaha, Vamanaya Namaha, Sridharaya Namaha, Rishikeshaya Namaha, Padmanabhaya Namaha, Damodaraya Namaha, Sankarshnaya Namaha, Vasudevaya Namaha, Pradyumnaya Namaha, Niruddhaya Namaha, Uttamaya Namaha, Dokshaya Namaha, Narasimhaya Namaha, Achyutaya Namaha, Janadraya Namaha, Upendraya Namaha, Hare Namaha, Sri Krishna Namaha. Hari Om. Last time when we discussed, Kalayavana was killed and Muchukunda got blessed for Lord Krishna, blessed by Lord Krishna. Now we came to the 52nd chapter of Dashamaskanda of Mahabhagavata Purana. This chapter describes how Lord Balarama and Lord Krishna running as if in the fear went to Dwaraka. Then Lord Krishna heard the message of Rukmini from the mouth of the Brahmana and chose her as his wife. King Muchukunda, shown mercy by Lord Sri Krishna, offered obeisances and circumambulated him. The king then left the cave and saw that humans, animals, trees, and plants were all smaller than when he had fallen asleep. From this he could understand that the age of Kali Yuga was at hand. Thus, in a mood of detachment from all the material association, the king began worshipping the Supreme Lord Sri Hari. Sri Krishna returned to Mathura, which was still under the siege of barbarian army of Kalayavana. He destroyed all this army, collected all the valuables of the soldiers had been carrying, and set off for Dwaraka. Just then Jarasandha arrived on the scene with a force of 23 Akshayani army. Lord Balarama and Lord Krishna, acting as if fearful, left their riches aside and ran far away. Because Jarasandha could not appreciate their true power, he ran after them. After running a long way, Balarama and Krishna came to a mountain named Pravarshana mountain and proceeded to climb it. Jarasandha thought they had hidden inside a cave and looked all over for them, unable to find them. He built fires on all sides of the mountain. As the vegetation of the mountain slopes burst into flame, Krishna and Balarama jumped off the peak. After reaching the ground unseen by Jarasandha and his followers, they returned to the Dwaraka fort, which floated within the sea. Jarasandha decided that Balarama and Krishna had turned to death in the fire, and he took his army back to his kingdom. At this point, Maharaja Parikshit asked a question, and Sri Shukadeva Goswami responded to it by beginning to narrate the history of the marriage of Lord Sri Krishna and Rukmini. Rukmini, the youngest daughter of Bhishmaka, king of Vidharba, had heard of Sri Krishna's beauty, strength, and other fine qualities, and she therefore made up her mind that he would be the perfect husband for her. Lord Krishna also wanted to marry her, but although Rukmini's other relatives approved of her marriage to Krishna, her brother Rukmini was envious of the Lord Krishna and thus forbade her to marry him. Rukmini wanted her to marry Shishupala instead. Rukmini, unhappy, took up her duties in the preparation for the marriage. Rukmini unhappily took up her duties in preparation for the marriage, but she also sent a trustworthy Brahmana to Krishna with a letter. See the situation of Rukmini. Her brother opposed the marriage with Krishna, although other members of the family agreed. So with Rukmini was very unhappy. She sent a trustworthy Brahmana to Lord Krishna with a letter requesting. When the Brahmana arrived in Dwaraka, Sri Krishna properly honored him with ritual worship and other tokens of reverence. The Lord then asked the Brahmana why he had come. The Brahmana opened Rukmini's letter and showed it to Lord Krishna, who had the messenger read it to him. Rukmini Devi wrote, "Ever since I have heard about you, my lord, I have become completely attracted to you. Without fail, please come before my marriage to Shishupala and take me away. In accordance with the family custom, on the day before my marriage, I will visit the temple of goddess Ambika. That would be the best opportunity for you to appear and easily kidnap me. If you do not show me this favor, I will give up my life by fasting and observing severe oaths. Then perhaps in my next life, I will be able to obtain you." After reading Rukmini's letter to Lord Krishna, the Brahmana took his leave so he might carry out his daily religious duties. After reading the Rukmini's letter to Lord Krishna, the Brahmana took his leave so he might carry out his daily religious duties. So that's the summary of the 52nd chapter. The shloka starts with Shuka Uvacha. Ittam sonu grahitonga krishnena akshukarandanaha tvam parikramya sanyamma nisyakama guhamakat. Shuka Maharshi is telling Parikshit Raja, "My dear king, thus graced by Lord Krishna, Muchukunda circumambulated Lord Krishna and bowed down to him. Then Muchukunda, the beloved descendant of Ikshvaku, exited through the mouth of the cave. Saviksha Kshullakan Martyan Pashun Virudatmisputin Matva Kalivigam Praptam Jagama Dishamuttaram." Seeing that the size of all the human beings, animals, trees, and plants was severely reduced, and thus realizing that the age of Kaliuga was at hand, Muchukunda left for the north. There are several significant words in this verse. A standard Sanskrit dictionary gives the following English meaning of the word Kshullaka, a little small, low, vile, poor, indigent, wicked, malicious, abandoned, hard, pained, distressed. These are the symptoms of the age of Kali Yuga, and all these qualities are said here to apply to the men, animals, plants, and trees in this age. We who are enamored of ourselves and our environment can perhaps imagine the superior beauty and living conditions available to people in former ages. The last line of this text, Jagama Disham Uttaram, he went toward the north, can be understood as follows. By traveling the north in India, one comes to the world's highest mountains, the Himalayas. There one can still find many beautiful peaks and valleys, where there are quiet hermitages suitable for austerity and meditation. Thus, in Vedic culture, going to the north indicates renouncing the comforts of ordinary society and going to the Himalayan mountains to practice serious austerities for spiritual advancement. The sober king, beyond material association and free of doubt, was convinced of the value of austerity. Absorbing his mind in Lord Krishna, he came to Gandhamadana mountain. The name Gandhamadana indicates a place of delightful fragrances. Undoubtedly, Gandhamadana Parvata was filled with the aroma of wild flowers and forest honey and with other natural scents. There he arrived at Badrikashrama, the abode of Lord Naranarayana, where remaining tolerant of all dualities. He peacefully worshipped the Supreme Lord Hari by performing severe austerities. Bhagavan Punaravrajya Purim Yavane Mishtitam Hatva Mlecha Balam Nitye Tadiyam Dwaraka Dhanam. The Lord returned to Mathura, which was still surrounded by the soldiers of Kalyavana. Then he destroyed the army of barbarians and began taking their valuables to Dwaraka. It is clear from this verse that Kalyavana alone pursued Lord Krishna into the mountain cave. When Krishna returned to the besieged city of Mathura, he eliminated the vast barbarian army. As the wealth was being carried by oxen and men under Lord Krishna's direction, Jarasandha appeared at the head of 23 armies, 23 Akshoini Sainya. O king, seeing the fierce waves of the enemy's army, the two Madhavas, imitating human behavior, ran swiftly away. Abandoning the abundant riches, fearless but feigning fear, they went many yojanas on their lotus-like feet. When he saw them fleeing, powerful Jarasandha laughed loudly and then pursued them with charioteers and foot soldiers. He could not understand the exalted position of the two lords. Apparently, exhausted after fleeing a long distance, the two lords climbed a mountain, high mountain named Pravarshana, upon which Lord Indra showers incessant rain. Although he knew they were hiding on the mountain, Jarasandha could find no trace of them. Therefore, O king, he placed a firewood on all sides and set the mountain ablaze. Clearly, we are observing one of the Supreme Lord's transcendental pastimes. Although the Bhagavatam states that the two lords Krishna and Balarama were exhausted even in their so-called exhausted state, they were able to quickly climb a high mountain and shortly thereafter jump off it to the ground. It would be unwise and illogical to ignore the whole picture the sages are giving us here and instead try to pick apart isolated descriptions. Clearly, we are watching the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, in the midst of his spiritual pastimes. We are not observing an ordinary human being. Lord Krishna and Lord Balarama were still quite young men when this pastime took place. And one can easily see in these descriptions how they must have been enjoying themselves, eagerly fleeing from the somewhat ridiculous King Jarasandha, racing up a mountain, jumping off, and totally befuddling the constantly failing demon, who somehow or other never lost confidence in himself. Seen without envy or quarrelsomeness, the Lord's pastimes are immensely entertaining. The two of them then suddenly jumped from the burning mountain, which was 11 yojanas high, and fell to the ground. 11 yojanas is approximately 90 miles height. Unseen by their opponent or his followers, O king, those two most exalted Yadus returned to their city of Dwaraka, which had the ocean as a protective moat. Jarasandha, moreover, mistakenly thought that Balarama and Keshava had burned to death in the fire. Thus, he withdrew his vast military force and returned to the Magadha kingdom. Anarthadipati Sriman Raivato Revatim Suntam Brahmana Chodaha Pradhat Balayeti Puroditam. As ordered by Lord Brahma, Raivata, the opulent ruler of Anartha, gave Lord Balarama his daughter Raivati in the marriage. This has already been discussed. The topic of Lord Krishna's marriage to Rukmini will now be discussed. By way of introduction, a brief mention is made of his brother Balaram's marriage. This marriage was alluded to in the 9th canto of the Bhagavatam, 3rd chapter, text 33 to 36. Bhagavanapi Govinda Upayeme Kurodvaha Vaidarbhim Bhishma Sutam Sriyam Matram Swayam Mare Pramatyatarasaradhyaha Shalvadhimcha Shaidapakshagan Pashyaitam Sarvalokanam Takshaputra Sudamiva. O hero among the Kurus, the Supreme Lord himself, Govinda, married Bhishmaka's daughter Vaidarbhi, who was a direct expansion of the goddess of fortune Lakshmi. The Lord did this by her desire, and in the process he beat down Salva and other kings who took Shishupala's side. Indeed, as everyone watched, Sri Krishna took Rukmini just as a Garuda wholly stole nectar from the demigods. Here, the situation is like this. Rukmini is the daughter of Bhishmaka, the king of Vidharba. Rukmini is fall in love with Lord Krishna. And Bhishmaka and other members of the family agreed for Rukmini to marry Krishna. But her brother Rukmini is the one who is not allowing her to marry Rukmini to Krishna. He is supporting to Shishupala to marry his sister Rukmini. And in this situation, Rukmini written a letter and sent it to the Lord Krishna with a trusted Brahmana. That's what happened. Now Lord Krishna took Rukmini just as Garuda boldly stole nectar from the gods. Srila Jiva Goswami gives the following profound comments on these two verses. The words Shreyo Matram indicates that beautiful Rukmini is a direct expansion of the eternal goddess of fortune, Mahalakshmi. Therefore, she is worthy to be the bride of the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, as stated in Brahma Samhita. Shreyo Kanta Kantaha Paramam Purushaha. In the spiritual world, all the female lovers are goddesses of fortune, and the male lover is the supreme personality Godhead Krishna. Thus, Srila Jiva Goswami explains Srimati Rukmini Devi is a plenary portion of Srimati Radharani. The Kartika Mahatmya section of the Padma Purana states Kishora Gopa Kanyas Ta Yuvana Raja Kanyakaha. In the childhood of Sri Krishna, enjoyed the daughters of the covered men, and in his adolescence, he enjoyed with the daughters of the kings. Similarly, in the Skanda Purana, we find this statement Rukmini Dwarayatam tu Radha Vrindavane Vani. Rukmini is in Dwaraka, but Radha is in the forest of Vrindavana. Rukmini is in Dwaraka, and Radha is in the forest of Vrindavana. The term Swayam Vare here means by one's own choice, although the word often refers to a formal Vedic ceremony in which an aristocratic girl may select her own husband. Here it indicates the informal and indeed unprecedented event surrounding Krishna's marriage to Rukmini. In fact, Sri Krishna and Srimati Rukmini choose each other because of their eternal transcendental love. King Parikshit said, the Supreme Lord married Rukmini, the beautiful faced daughter of Bhishmaka, in the Rakshasa style, or so I have heard. Srila Sridhara Swami quotes the following Smriti statement, Rakshaso Yuddha Harantaha. Haran. A Rakshasa marriage takes place when the bride is stolen from one's rival suitors by force. Similarly, Shukadeva Goswami himself has already said, Rajnaha Pramatya. Krishna had to beat down opposing kings to take Rukmini. Raja Uvacha Bhagavan Bhishmagatam Rukmini Ruchirananam Rakshasena Vidanena Upayema iti Shrutam. My Lord, I wish to hear from here how the immeasurably powerful Lord Krishna took away his bride while defeating such kings as Magadha and Salva. We should not think that Sri Krishna was actually afraid of Jarasandha. In the very next chapter, we will find that the Krishna easily defeated his soldiers. Thus, we should never doubt the supreme prowess of Lord Krishna. Bhagavan Shrotum Ichchami Krishna Swami Tateja Shrutajno Nitya Nutanaha. What experienced listener, O Brahmana, could ever grow satiated while listening to the pious, charming, and ever fresh topics of Lord Krishna, which cleans away the world contamination? Sri Badarayani said, there was a king named Bhishmaka, the powerful ruler of Vidharba king, 5 sons and 1 daughter of lovely countenance. Rukmini was the firstborn son, followed by Rukmaratha, and Rukmabahu, Rukmakesha, and Rukmamali. Their sister was the exalted Rukmini. Hearing the beauty, prowess, transcendental character of opulence of Mukunda, from visitors to the palace who sang his praises, Rukmini decided that he would be the perfect husband for her. The word Sadrasam indicates that Rukmini and Sri Krishna had similar qualities and thus were naturally attracted to each other. King Bhishmaka was a pious man, and therefore many spiritually advanced persons must have visited his place. These saintly persons undoubtedly preached openly by the glories of Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna knew that Rukmini possessed intelligence, auspicious bodily markings, beauty, proper behavior, and all other good qualities. Concluding that she would be an ideal wife for him, he made up his mind to marry her. Just as Lord Krishna was described as Sadashrama Patim, an ideal husband for Rukmini, being just like her, Rukmini is described as Sadashram. Rukmini is described as Sadasram Bharyam, an ideal wife for Sri Krishna, just because being just like him, that is natural, since Srimati Rukmini is Lord Krishna's internal potency. Because Rukmini envied the Lord, O king, he forbade his family members to give his sister to Krishna, although they wanted to. Instead, Rukmini decided to give Rukmini to Shishupala. Rukmini abused his position as an elder brother in the family and acted with impure motives. He would only suffer for his decision. Dark-eyed Vidharbi was aware of this plan, and it deeply upset her. Analyzing the situation, she quickly sent a trustworthy Brahmana to Lord Krishna. Upon reaching Dwaraka, the Brahmana was brought inside by the gatekeepers and saw the primeval personality of Godhead sitting on a golden throne. Seeing the Brahmana, Sri Krishna, Lord of the Brahmanas, came down from his throne and seated him. Then the Lord worshipped him just as he himself is worshipped by the gods. After the Brahmana had eaten and rested, Lord Sri Krishna, the goal of saintly devotees, came forward, and while massaging the Brahmana's feet with his own hands, he patiently questioned him as follows. Kachvidrujavar Shrestha Dharmaste Vruddha Sammataha Vartate Nati Krichena Santushta Manasaha Sada. The Supreme Lord said, O best of exalted Brahmana, are your religious practices sanctioned by senior authorities, proceeding without any great difficulty? Is your mind always fully satisfied? Here we translated the word dharma as religious practice, although this does not fully convey the Sanskrit sense of the word. Krishna did not appear within a secular society. The people in Vedic times could hardly imagine a society that did not understand the need of to obey God's law. Thus, to them, the word dharma conveyed a sense of duty in general. Thus, to them, the word dharma conveyed a sense of duty in general, higher principles, prescribed duty, and so on. It was automatically understood that such duties were within a religious context. But religion in those days was not a specific aspect of department of life, but rather a guiding light for all the activities activity. Irreligious life was considered demonic, and God's hand as seen in everything. When Brahmana is satisfied with whatever comes his way and does not fall away from his religious duties, those very religious principles become his desired cow, fulfilling all his wishes. An unsatisfied Brahmana wanders restlessly from one plant to another, even if he becomes king of the heaven. But satisfied Brahmana, though he may possess nothing, rests specifically, rests peacefully, all his limbs free of distress. Those who are unsatisfied feel distress throughout their body, becoming subject to many diseases. A satisfied Brahmana, however, though he may possess nothing, is peaceful and calm, and there is no distress from the world, from his bodily or mind. I repeatedly bow my head in respect to those Brahmanas who are satisfied with their lot, saintly, prideless, and peaceful. They are the best well-wishers of all living beings. Srila Sridhara Swami explains that Swalabha also means achieving oneself, or in other words, self-realization. Thus, an advanced Brahmana is always satisfied with his spiritual understanding, never depending on material formalities or facilities. Kachidraha kushalam brahman rajato yasya hi prajaha sukam vasanti vijaye palyamana same priyaha. O Brahmana, is your king attending to your welfare? Indeed, that king in whose country the citizens are happy and protected is very dear to me. The citizens are happy and protected is very dear to me. Yatta sramagato durga nistreryeha yanchaya sarvam no brahma gukye chet kinkarye karamamate. Whence you have come? Whence have you come? Crossing the impossible sea, and for what purpose? Explain all this to use. If it is not secret, tell us what we may do for you. Thus questioned by the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, who incarnates to perform his pastimes, the Brahmana told him everything. The word grihita may be translated as grasped or caught, and thus exactly as in English, may also mean to perceive or understand something. Therefore, Lord Krishna's transcendental body is perceived, understood, or in other words, grasped by the devotee when the Lord comes to exhibit his transcendental pastime. These pastimes are not whimsical, but are part of a complex program, structured and executed by Lord himself for awakening the conditioned souls to their natural love and devotion for him and bringing them back to Godhead. Rukmini Vacha. So Rukmini is telling, Shrutva gunan bhava sundara shunan taite shunan tvante nirvishya karana vihanayamruto nigantam rupam drusham drishyam matakila labham tvayachyutamiti chittamam pattapam me chittamam patram pame. Rukmini said in her letter, as read by the Brahmana, O beauty of the words, having heard of your qualities which enter the ears of those who hear and remove their bodily distress, and having also heard of your beauty which fulfills all the visual desires of those who see, I have fixed my shameless mind upon you, Lord Krishna. Rukmini was a king's daughter, courageous and bold, and furthermore, she would rather die than lose Krishna. Considering all this, she wrote a frank, explicit letter begging Krishna to come and take her away. O Mukunda, you are equal only to yourself in lineage, character, beauty, knowledge, youthfulness, wealth, and influence. O lion among men, you delight the minds of all mankind. What aristocratic, sober minded, and marriageable girl of a good quality of family would not choose you as an husband when the proper time has come? Therefore, my dear Lord, I have chosen you as my husband, and I surrender myself to you. I have chosen you as my husband. I surrender myself to you. Please come swiftly, O Almighty One, and make me your wife. My dear lotus-eyed Lord, let Shishupala never touch the hero's portion like a jackal stealing the property of a lion. If I have sufficiently worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead by pious works, sacrifices, charity, rituals, and vows, and also by worshipping the gods, Brahmana, and Gurus, then my Gadagraja, come and take my hand, and not Damagoshasan or anyone else. The Acharyas comment as follows. On this verse, Rukmini felt that no one could obtain Lord Krishna by the efforts of a single lifetime. Therefore, she earnestly pointed out that the pious activities she had performed in that life and previous lives, hoping to convince Lord Krishna to come. O unconquerable one, tomorrow when my marriage ceremony is about to begin, you should arrive unseen in Vidharba and surround yourself with the leaders of your army. Then crush the forces of Chedi Raja and Magadha Raja and marry me in Rakshasa style, winning me with your valor. As Srila Prabhupada points out in Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Rukmini being born of a royal blood, had a brilliant grasp of political affairs. She advised Lord Krishna to enter the city alone and unnoticed and then surround himself with his military commanders so he could do what was needed. Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti compares the coming fight to the Lord's churning of the ocean to extract the goddess of Lakshmi. Gorgeous Rukmini, the goddess of fortune, would be gained in the coming turbulence. Since I will be staying within the inner chambers of the palace, you may wonder how can I carry you away without killing some of your relatives. But I shall tell you a way. On the day before the marriage, there is a grand procession to honor the royal family's deity, and on this procession, the new bride goes outside the city to visit goddess Ambika or Girija. Clever Rukmini anticipated a possible objection on the part of Sri Krishna. He certainly would not object to subduing the rascal like Shishupala and Jarasandha, but he might be reluctant to injure or kill Rukmini's relatives, some of whom might block his way to the palace of inner sanctum, where the women were protected. The procession to or from the temple of Girija Durga could provide the perfect opportunity for Lord Krishna to kidnap Rukmini without harming her relatives. So that's why she suggested Lord Krishna to come to Ambika's temple or Girija's temple. O lotus-eyed one, great souls like Lord Shiva hanker to bathe in the dust of your lotus feet and thereby destroy If I cannot obtain your mercy, I shall simply give up my vital force, which will have become weak from the severe penances I will perform. Then, after hundreds of lifetime of endeavor, I may obtain your mercy at the end of the year. The divine Rukmini's extraordinary dedication to Lord Krishna is possibly only the spiritual platform not in the fragile world of mundane affection. Brahmana uvacha ityate guhya sandesha yadu deva maya bhrutah vimarsha krutam vimarsha kartum yachat kriyatam tadanantaram. The Brahmana said, "This is the confidential message I have brought with me, O Lord of Yadus. Please consider what must be done in these circumstances and do it at once." Without any further delay. When the Brahmana arrived, he broke the seal of confidential letter written in the privacy of Rukmini's quarters and meant only for Lord Krishna by using the term Guhya Sandesha. The trustworthy Brahmana, personally selected by Rukmini, here affirms that he has not violated the confidentiality of this message. Only Lord Krishna has heard it. Personally selected by Rukmini, her affirms that he has not violated the confidentiality of this message. Only Lord Krishna has heard it. Since the marriage of Rukmini was fast approaching, Sri Krishna would have to act immediately. The term Yadu Deva indicates Lord Krishna, as the Lord of Yadu dynasty, should make his decision and then mobilize his followers if necessary. That ends the 52nd chapter of the Dashamaskanda of Mahabhagavata Purana. Iti Srimad Mahabhagavate Mahapurane Paramahamsyam Samhitayam Dashamaskande Uttararde Rukmini Dvaha Prastave Dupanchashuttama Adhyaya. Now, 53rd chapter, we are proceeding. In this, Krishna and Rukmini got married on the Rakshasa style. This chapter 53 describes how Lord Krishna arrived in Kundinipura, the capital of Vidharba, and kidnapped Rukmini in the presence of powerful enemies. After Lord Krishna had heard the Brahmana messenger recite Rukmini's letter, the Lord said to him, "I am indeed attracted to Rukmini, and I know of her brother Rukmini's opposition to my marrying her. Therefore, I must kidnap her after crushing all the low-class kings, just as one might generate fire from the wood of friction." Since this solemnizing of oaths between Rukmini and Shishupala was scheduled to occur in only 3 days, Lord Krishna and Dwaraka led his chariot at once. Then he immediately set out for Vidharba kingdom, which is he reached after one night's travel. King Bhishmaka, trapped by his affection for his son Rukmini, was prepared to give his daughter to Shishupala. Bhishmaka saw to all the necessary preparations. He had the city decorated in various ways and had its main roads and intersections thoroughly cleansed. Damagosha, the king of Chedi, having also done everything necessary to prepare for his son's marriage, arrived in Vidharba. King Bhishmaka greeted him properly and gave him a place to stay. Many other kings such as Jarasandha, Salva, and Dantavakra also came to witness the occasion. These enemies of Krishna had conspired to kidnap King Bhishmaka agreed him properly and gave him a place to stay. Many other kings such as Jarasandha, Shalva, and Dantavakra also came to witness the occasion. These enemies of Krishna had conspired to kidnap the bride of Krishna. These enemies of Krishna had conspired to kidnap the bride if Krishna comes. They planned to fight him together and thus guarantee Shishupala his bride. Hearing of these plans, Lord Balarama gathered his entire army and quickly went to Kundinipura. On the night before the wedding, Rukmini, about to retire, had still not seen either the Brahmana or Krishna arrive. In anxiety, she cursed her bad fortune. But just then, she felt her left side twitch a good woman. Indeed, the Brahmana shortly appeared and related to her what Krishna had said, including his firm promise to kidnap her. When King Bhishmaka heard that Krishna and Balarama had arrived, he went out to greet them to the accompaniment of triumphant music. He worshipped the lords with various gifts and then designated residences for them. Thus the king showed due respect to the lords, as he did to reach of his numerous royal guests. The people of Vidharba, seeing Lord Krishna, remarked to one another that he alone would be suitable husband for Rukmini. They prayed that on the strength of whatever pious credit they had, Krishna might win Rukmini's hand. When the time came for Srimati Rukmini Devi to visit the temple of Sri Ambika, she proceeded there. When the time came for Srimati Rukmini Devi to visit the temple of Sri Ambika, she proceeded there, surrounded by many gods. After bowing down to the deity, Rukmini prayed to be allowed to have Sri Krishna as her husband. She submitted her prayers to Ambika to be allowed to have Sri Krishna as her husband. Then she took the hand of a girlfriend and left the Ambika temple. Seeing her inexpressible beauty, the great heroes present dropped their weapons. Seeing her inexpressible beauty, the great heroes present dropped their weapons and fell to the ground unconscious. Rukmini walked with deliberate steps until she noticed Krishna. Then, as everyone looked on, Sri Krishna took Rukmini onto his chariot, like a lion climbing his rightful share from a band of jackals. He drove back all the opposing kings and slowly made his exit, followed by his associates, Jarasandha and other kings unable to bear their defeat and dishonor, loudly condemned themselves, declaring that this defamation was like a pretty animal's stealing away what ritually belongs to the lion. Shukavacha Vaidabhyasatu sandesham nishamya yadunandanaha pragrihe praninam panim prasannidam abravit. Shukamuni is telling Parikshit Raj, thus hearing the confidential message of Princess Vidharba, that is Rukmini's message, Lord Yadunandana took the Brahmana's hand and smiling spoke to him as follows. Bhagavanuvacha tatahamapi tatchitto nidranjanalabe nishi vedaham Rukmini dveshan mohodvaho nivaritaha. Supreme Lord said, just as Rukmini's mind is fixed on me, my mind is also fixed on her. I can't even sleep at night. I know that Rukmini, out of envy, he was forbidden our marriage. Tamani, tamanayam, tamaniyasya unmatya. Tamaniyasya unmatya rajanya pasadan mrute. Matparamana vadhyangi medusu nishikamada. She has dedicated herself exclusively to me, and her beauty is flawless. I will bring her here after thrashing those worthless kings in battle, just as one brings a blazing flame out of the firewood. When latent fire is aroused in the wood, the fire bursts forth, consuming the wood in the act of manifestation. Similarly, the Lord Krishna boldly predicted that Rukmini would come forth to take his hand, and that in the process the wicked kings would be burned by the fire of Krishna's determination. Shukavacha Udvargakshacham jaya Rukminya Madhusudanaha Gatam Samyujata Manu Mashu Daruketyaha Saritim. Shukadeva Mahaswami said, Lord Madhusudana also understood the exact lunar time for Rukmini's wedding. Thus he told his driver, Daruka, ready my chariot immediately. Daruka brought the Lord's chariot, yoked with the horses named Shaibya, Sugriva, Meghapushpa, and Balahaka. He then stood before Lord Krishna with giant palms. Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti quotes the following text of Padma Purana describing Lord Krishna's chariot horses. Shaibya was great, green like a parrot's wings, Sugriva yellow gold, Meghapushpa the color of the cloud, and Balahaka a whitish. Aruho Sendan Aruhyaskandanam Shoridvija Maropya Turnigai Anata Dekaratrena Vidarbhanaga Mudhyayai. Lord Sauri mounted his chariot and had the Brahmana do likewise. Then the Lord's swift horses took them from the Anartha district to Vidharba in a single night. King Bhishmaka, the master of Kundinapura, having succumbed to the sway of affection for his son, was brought to give his daughter to Shishupala. The king saw to all the required preparation. Srila Sridhara Swami points out in this connection that King Bhishmaka had no particular liking for Shishupala, but rather acted out of attachment for his son Rukmini. The king had the main avenues, commercial roads, intersections thoroughly cleaned and then sprinkled with water. And he also had the city decorated with rampant archways and multicolored banners on poles. The men and the women of the city arrayed in spotless raiment, anointed with fragrant sandalwood paste, wore precious necklaces, flower garlands, and jeweled ornaments, and their opulent homes were the men and women of the city arrayed in spotless raiment and anointed with the fragrant sandalwood paste, more precious necklaces, flower garlands, and jeweled ornaments, and their opulent homes were filled with aroma of aguru. When earthen roads were sprinkled with water, the dust settles down and the road becomes smooth and firm. The king Bhishmaka thoroughly prepared for the great wedding, setting the scene of Lord Krishna's triumphant abduction of beautiful Rukmini Devi. O king, in accordance with the prescribed rituals, Maharaja Bhishmaka worshipped the forefathers, gods, and brahmanas, feeding them all properly. Then he had the traditional mantras chanted for the well-being of the bride. The bride cleaned her teeth and bathed, after which she put on the auspicious wedding necklace. Then she was dressed in brand new upper and lower garments and adorned with most excellent jeweled ornaments. According to Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti, only spotless clothing fresh off the loom should be worn during auspicious ceremonies. The best of Brahmanas chanted mantras of the Aga, Sama, and Yajurvedas. Rigveda, Samaveda, Yajurvedas for the bride's protection, and the priest learned in the Atharvana Veda offered oblations to pacify the controlling planets. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti points out that the Atharvana Veda often deals with the pacification of unfavorable planets. Outstanding in his knowledge of regulative principles, the king rewarded the Brahmanas with gold, silver, and cows, sesame seeds mixed with raw sugar. एवं चेदीपति राजा दमघोषोस्ताय वै कारयामास समन्त्रज्ञे सर्वमभ्युदयोचितम्. Raja Dhamaghosh, Lord of Chedi, had also engaged Brahmanas expert in chanting mantras to perform all rituals necessary to assure his son's prosperity. The King Dhamaghosh traveled to Kundanipura accompanied by armies of elephants exuding mada, chariots hung and golden chains, and numerous cavalry and infantry soldiers. Bhishmaka, the Lord of Vidharba, came out of the city and met King Dhamagosha, offering him tokens of respect. Bhishmaka then settled Dhamagosha in a residence especially constructed for the occasion. Shishupala's supporters, Shalva, Jarasandha, Dantavakra, and Vidurata all came along with Paundraka and thousands of other kings who are supporting Jarasandha. Those familiar with the history of Lord Krishna's life will immediately recognize the names given in this text. The kings mentioned here maintained a deep animosity toward Lord Krishna and opposed him in one way or the other. But they were also the kings mentioned here maintained a deeply animosity toward Lord Krishna and opposed him in one way or the other. But they were all to be frustrated and defeated on the occasion of Shishupala's would-be wedding. It's only a would-be wedding for Shishupala. To secure the bride for Shishupala, the kings who envied Krishna and Balarama came to the following decision among themselves. If Krishna comes here with Balarama and the other Yadus to steal the bride, we shall bind we shall band together and fight him. Thus, those envious kings went to the wedding with their entire armies and a full complement of the military conveyances. The word samhataha, which normally means bound rightly together, many also mean thoroughly struck down or killed. Thus, although Krishna's enemies thought they were unified and strong, samhatha in the former sense, they could not successfully oppose personality of Godhead, and consequently they could be struck down and killed. Sammataha in the later sense. When Lord Balarama heard about these preparations for the inimical kings and how Lord Krishna had set off alone to steal the bride, he feared that a fight would ensue. Immersed in affection for his brother, he hurried to Kundinapura with mighty army consisting of infantry and of soldiers riding on elephants, horses, and chariots. The lovely daughter of Bhishmaka anxiously awaited the arrival of Krishna, but when she did not see the Brahman's return, she thought as follows. Princess Rukmini thought, alas, my wedding is to take place when the night ends. How unlucky I am. Lotus-eyed Krishna does not come. I don't know why. And even the Brahmana messenger has not yet returned. It's apparent from this verse, as confirmed by Sri Sridhar Swami, that the present scene takes place before sunrise. Perhaps the faultless Lord, even while preparing to come here, saw something contemptible in me and therefore has not come to take my hand. Princess Rukmini boldly invited Sri Krishna to kidnap her. When Rukmini did not see him came, she naturally feared that he had rejected her proposal, perhaps finding some unacceptable quality in her. As expressed here, the Lord himself is anavadya, faultless. And if he saw some fault in Rukmini's, she would be an unworthy bride for him. It was natural for a young princess to feel such anxiety. Furthermore, if Lord Krishna had actually made this decision, it would be natural for the Brahmana to fear Rukmini's reaction, were he to bring her the news, and that would explain why he had not come. Lord Rukmini became very unhappy. I am extremely unfortunate, she thinks, for the Creator is not favorably disposed toward me, nor is the great Lord Shiva, or perhaps Shiva's wife Ambika Gauri, who is known as Gauri, Rudrani, Girija, and Sati, has turned against me. Rukmini thought everybody is against her. Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti explains that Rukmini might have thought, even if Kamsa wanted to come, he might have been Lord Krishna is driving in the night to Vidharba kingdom. Rukmini was in distress as she thought in this way. The young maiden, whose mind had been stolen by Krishna, closed her tear-filled eyes, remembering that there was still time. Srila Swami explains the word Kalajna as follows. Rukmini thought it is not even the right time yet for Govinda to come, and thus she felt a bit consoled. O king, as the bride thus awaited the arrival of Govinda, she felt a twitch in her left eye and arm and eye. O king, as the bride thus awaited the arrival of Govinda, she felt a twitch in her left eye, arm and eye. This was a sign that something desirable would happen. Just then, the purest of learned Brahmanas, following Krishna's order, came to see the divine princess Rukmini within the inner chambers of the palace. According to Srila Swami, Sri Krishna had reached the gardens outside the city, and out of concern for Rukmini, he had instructed the Brahmana to tell her of his arrival. Noting the Brahmana's joyful face and serene movements, saintly Rukmini, who could expertly interpret such symptoms, inquired from him with a pure smile. The Brahmana announced to her the arrival of Lord Yadunandana and relayed the Lord's promise to marry her. So Lord Krishna sent a Brahmana to send a message to Rukmini telling that he has arrived in Kundanipura. Princess Vidharba was overjoyed to learn Krishna's arrival. Not finding anything at hand suitable to offer the Brahmana, she simply bowed down to him. The king, upon hearing that Krishna and Balaram had come and were eager to witness his daughter's wedding, went forth with abundant offering to greet them as the music renounced. Music resounded. Presenting them with Madhuparka, new clothing, and other desirable gifts, he worshipped them according to standard rituals. Generous King Bhishmaka arranged opulent accommodations for the two lords and also for their army and entourage. In this way, he afforded them proper hospitality. Thus, it was that Bhishmaka gave all desirable things to the kings who had assembled for the occasion, honoring them as befitted their political power, age, physical prowess, and wealth. When the residents of Vidharbapura heard that Lord Krishna had come, they all went to see him. With the cupped palms of their eyes, they drank the honey of his lotus face. The people of the Vidharba city said, Rukmini had no one else deserves to become his wife, and he also possessing such flawless beauty is the only suitable husband for Princess Bhishmi. According to Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti, this text combines the statements made by different citizens. Some pointed out that Rukmini was suitable wife for Krishna, others said that no one else was suitable. Similarly, some stated that Krishna was more suitable for Rukmini, and others stated that no one else would be suitable as a husband for Rukmini apart from Krishna. May Achyuta, the creator of the three worlds, be satisfied with whatever pious work we may have done and show his mercy by taking the hand of the daughter of Vidharba kingdom. The devoted citizens of Vidharba lovingly offered their entire stock of pious credit to Princess Rukmini. The devoted citizens of Vidharba lovingly offered their entire stock of pious credit to Princess Rukmini. They were very eager to see her marry Lord Krishna because she likes him. Bound by their swelling love, the city's residents spoke in this way. Then the bride, protected by guards, left the inner palace to visit the temple of Ambika. Srila Vishnunatha Chakravarti quotes the Medini dictionary's definition of the word Kala as follows. Kala mule pravardinu sayat chillado amsa matrake. The word Kala means a root, increase, a stone, or a mere part. Rukmini silently went out on the foot to see the lotus feet of deity Bhavani, accompanied by her mothers and girlfriends and protected by the king's valiant soldiers who felt their unprized weapons at the ready. She simply absorbed her mind in the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, and all the while Mada Igas, conch shells, and waves, horns, and other musical instruments resounded. नानोपहार बलि मुख्यः सहस्रशः स्वग्बन्ध वस्त्राभरणे द्विजपत्रे गायन्तश्च सुवन्तश्च गायका वाद्यवादकाः परिवार्य वधूं जुग्मं सूतमागधवन्दिनः. Behind the bride followed thousands of prominent courtesans, hearing various offerings and presents, along with well-adorned Brahmanas' wives, singing and reciting prayers of bearing gifts of garlands, scents, clothing, and jewelry. There were also professional singers, musicians, bards, and chronically So we came to the 44th sloka. Upon reaching the goddess temple, Ambika's temple, Rukmini first washed her lotus feet and hands and then sipped water for purification. This is called Achamana. Keshvaya Swaha, Om Narayana Swaha, Om Madhvaya Swaha. This is Achamana they do before the worship of Ambika. Thus sanctified and peaceful, she came into the presence of Mother Ambika. So she came to the presence of the Mother Ambika, who is the Shiva's consort. The older wives of Brahmanas, expert in the knowledge of rituals, led young Rukmini in offering respects to Bhavani, who appeared with her consort, Lord Bhava. According to the Acharyas, where the term Bhavanmitham indicates that in the Ambika temple visited by Rukmini, the presiding deity was the goddess whose husband appeared in an accompanying role. Thus, the ritual was properly performed by woman. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti comments that the term Vidhi Nyaha may be understood to mean that since the learned wives of Brahmanas knew of Rukmini's desire to marry Krishna, the verb Vandyayam Chakruhu thus indicates that they prompted her to pray for what she really wanted. In this way, like the goddess Bhavani, Rukmini could be united with her eternal male companion. O Mother Ambika, wife of Lord Shiva, I repeatedly offer my obeisance unto you, together with your children. May Lord Krishna become my husband. Please grant this. So, Ambika is the Parvati, Shiva's consort, and Rukmini submit her prayers to Ambika to bless her, Krishna to become her husband. May Lord Krishna become my husband. So, Ishvara's wife Ambika is going to bless Rukmini to get Krishna as her husband. Rukmini worshipped the goddess with water, scents, whole grains, incense, clothing, garlands and necklaces, jewelry and other prescribed offerings and gifts, and also with arrays of lamps. The married Brahmana's wife, married Brahmana wife, woman, they are called Pativratas, Brahmana Pativratas. Each performed worship simultaneously with the same items, also offering savories and cakes prepared betel nut, sacred threads, fruit, and sugar cane juice. The ladies gave the bride the remnants of the offerings, and then blessed her. She in turn bowed down to them and the deity and accepted remnants as prasadam. The princess then gave up her vow of silence and left the Ambika temple, holding onto a maidservant with her hand, which was adorned with a jeweled ring. Rukmini appeared as enchanting as the Lord's illusory potency, who enchants even the sober and grave. Thus the kings gazed upon her virgin beauty, her shapely waist, and her lovely face adorned with earrings. Her hips were graced with a jewel-studded belt. Her breasts were just budding, and her eyes seemed apprehensive of her encroaching locks of hair. She smiled sweetly, her jasmine bud teeth reflecting the glow of bimba red lips as she walked with the motions of a royal woman. The effulgence of her tinkling ankle bells beautified her feet. Seeing her, the assembled heroes were totally bewildered. Lust tore at their hearts. Indeed, when the king saw her broad smile and she glanced, they became stupefied. Rukmini displayed her beauty for Krishna alone. Slowly she advanced the two moving lotus whorls of her feet, awaiting the arrival of the Supreme Lord Krishna. With the fingernails of her left hand, she pushed some strands of hair away from her face and shyly looked from corners of her eyes at the king standing before her. At that moment she saw Krishna. Then, while his enemies looked on, the Lord seized the princess who was eager to mount his chariot. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, Rukmini was anxious that her locks of her hair might impede her vision. Since she was most eager to see her beloved Krishna, the non-devotees or demons are bewildered at seeing the opulences of the Lord and think that his potency is meant for their gross sense gratification. But Rukmini, an expansion of Krishna's internal pleasure potency, was meant for the Lord alone. Vishwanatha Chakravarti quotes the following words to describe the kind of woman known as Shama. A woman is called Shama when her breasts are very firm and when someone in her presence feels warm in the winter and cool in the summer. Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti further points out that since the beautiful form of Rukmini is a manifestation of the Lord's internal energy, the non-devotees cannot perceive her. Thus, the heroic kings assembled in Vidharba were agitated with lust upon seeing the Lord's illusory potency and expansion of Rukmini. In other words, no one can lust after the Lord's eternal concern, since as soon as one's mind is contaminated with lust, the covering of Maya separates one from the pristine beauty of the spiritual world and its inhabitants. Finally, Srimati Rukmini Devi felt shy as she looked from the corners of her eyes at the other kings, for she did not want to meet the glance of those inferior men. Lifting the princess onto his chariot, whose flag bore the emblem of Garuda, Lord Madhava drove back the circle of kings with Balarama in the lead. He slowly excited, like a lion removing his prey from the midst of the jackals. As soon as Lord Krishna see Rukmini, Rukmini offered her hand for Krishna, lifting her, the princess, onto his chariot, whose flag bore the emblem of Garuda. Lord Madhava drove back the circle of kings, with Balarama in the lead. He slowly excited, like a lion removing his prey from the midst of jackals. The kings inimical to the Lord, headed by Jarasandha, could not tolerate this humiliating defeat. They exclaimed, "Oh, damn us! Though we are mighty archers, More mere cowards have stolen our honor, just as the puny animals might steal the honor of the lions. From the last two verses of this chapter, it is clear that the perverted intelligence of demons makes them perceive things in a way exactly opposite to reality. It is clearly stated that Lord Krishna stole Rukmini like a lion taking his prey from the midst of jackals. The demons, however, saw themselves as lions and Lord Krishna as an inferior creature. Without Krishna consciousness, life becomes most dangerous. Thus end the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada to the 10th canto, 53rd chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Krishna Kidnaps Rukmini. So, in the next chapter 54, the marriage of Krishna and Rukmini takes place. This chapter describes how Lord Krishna defeated the opposing kings after kidnapping Rukmini. This figure, Rukmini's brother Rukmini, brought Rukmini to his capital and married her. As Sri Krishna was taking Princess Rukmini away, the inimical kings gathered their armies and pursued him. Lord Balarama and the generals of the Yadava army turned to face these opponents, blocking their advance. The enemy armies then began pouring incessant showers of arrows upon Lord Krishna's army. Seeing her husbands to be forces under such violent attack, Srimati Rukmini looked at Sri Krishna fearfully. But Krishna simply smiled and told her there was nothing to fear because his army would surely destroy the enemy in short order. Lord Balarama and the other heroes then began to annihilate the opposing army with Narcha arrows. The enemy kings headed by Jarasandha retreated after suffering the destruction of their armies at the hands of Yadavas. Jarasandha consoled Shishupala, happiness and distress are never permanent and are under the control of the Supreme Lord. 17 times Krishna defeated me, but in the end I was victorious over him. Thus, seeing that victory and defeat are under the control of destiny and time, I have learned not to succumb to either lamentation or joy. Time now favors the Yadavas, so they have defeated you with only a small army. But in the future, time will favor you and you will surely conquer them. Consoled in this way, Shishupala took his followers and returned to his kingdom. Rukmini's brother Rukmini, who hated Krishna, was infuriated by Krishna's kidnapping her sister. So after vowing before all the kings present that he would not return to Kundinapura until Krishna had been destroyed and Rukmini rescued, Rukmini set out with his army to attack Lord Krishna. Ignorant of Lord Krishna's glories, Rukmini boldly went out to attack Krishna in a lone chariot. He approached the Lord, struck him with arrows and demanded that he release Rukmini. Sri Krishna fended off Rukmini's weapons, breaking them to pieces. Then he raised his sword high and was about to kill Rukmini when Rukmini interceded and requested not to kill her brother. Lord Krishna did not kill Rukmini, but with his sword he shaved off bits of Rukmini's hair here and there, leaving him disfigured. Just then Lord Balarama appeared on the scene with the other army. Seeing Rukmini disfigured, he gently reproached Krishna. To disfigure such a close family member is as good as killing him. Therefore, he should not be killed but set free. Lord Balarama then told Rukmini that the sorry condition of her brother was only the fruit of his past work. Since everyone is responsible for his own happiness and suffering, he further instructed her about the transcendental position of the jiva, soul, and how illusion of happiness and distress is simply a result of ignorance. Accepting Lord Balarama's instructions, Rukmini gave up her sorrow. Rukmini, meanwhile, felt totally frustrated, deprived as he was of all his strength and his will to fight, since he had vowed not to return home without conquering Krishna. Rukmini constructed a city on that very spot and took up residence there in a mood of undiminished anger. Lord Krishna took Rukmini to his capital Dwaraka and married her. All the citizens celebrated lavish style, broadcasting throughout the city accounts of how the Lord had kidnapped Rukmini. Everyone in Dwaraka was delighted to see Lord Krishna united with Rukmini. इति सर्वे सुसंरब्धा वाहनारोग्य दंशिता स्वय सैबले परिक्रांता अन्वयर्दुत कार्मिका. The 54th chapter, the first shloka is Shukavacha. Shukavacha is telling, having thus spoken, all those infuriated kings donned their armor and mounted their conveyances. Each king, bow in the hand, was surrounded by his own army as he went after Lord Krishna. The commanders of the Yadava army, seeing the enemy racing to attack, turned to face them and stood firm, O king, twanging their bows. Mounted on the backs of horses, the shoulders of elephants, and the seats of the chariots, the enemy kings, expert with weapons, rained down arrows upon Yadus like clouds pouring rain on mountains. Slender-waisted Rukmini, seeing the Lord's army covered by torrents of arrows, shyly looked at his face with fear-stricken eyes. In response, the Lord laughed and assured her, "Do not be afraid, beautiful-eyed one. This enemy force is about to be destroyed by your soldiers." They express his great affection for Rukmini. Lord Krishna gallantly referred to his own Yadava army as your men, indicating that the Lord's entire dynasty was now the property of his beloved queen. Supreme Lord Krishna desires to share his blissful opulences with all living beings, and thus he sincerely invites them to come back home, back to Godhead. The Krishna consciousness movement, introduced throughout the world by Srila Prabhupada on the order of his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, who himself preached all over India on the order of his exalted father Srila Bhakti Vinoda Thakura, is broadcasting the loving message of Lord Krishna. Remember him, serve him, return to him, and share in the infinite bounty of the kingdom of the God. The heroes of the Lord's army, headed by Gada and Sankarshana, could not tolerate the aggression of the opposing kings. Thus, with iron arrows, they began to strike down the enemy's horses, elephants, and chariots. The heads of soldiers fighting on chariots, horses, and elephants fell to the ground by the millions. Some heads were earrings and helmets, others turbans. Lying all around were things, legs, and fingerless hands, along with the hands clutching the swords, clubs, and bows, and also the heads of horses, donkeys, elephants, camels, wild asses, and humans. Karabha indicates the portion of the hand from the wrist to the base of the fingers. The same word may also indicate an elephant's trunk, and thus in this verse the implication is that the thighs lying on the battlefield resemble the trunks of elephant. Seeing their armies being struck down by the Vrishnis who were eager for victory, the kings headed by Jarasandha were discouraged and left the battlefield. The kings approached Shishupala, who was disturbed like a man who has lost his wife. His complexion was drained of color. His enthusiasm was gone, and his face appeared dried up. The kings spoke to him as follows. Although Shishupala had not married Rukmini, he passionately considered for his property, and thus he was devastated like a man who has lost his beloved wife. Jarasandha said, "Listen, Shishupala, O tiger among men, give up your depression. After all, embodied beings, happiness and unhappiness is never seen to be permanent, O king. Just as a puppet in the form of a woman dances by the desire of the puppeteer, so this world controlled by Supreme Lord struggles in both happiness and misery." By the will of the Supreme Lord, living beings are awarded the proper results of their own activities. One who understands the absolute truth surrenders to the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and is no longer considered to be within the material system of existence, since those enduring within the material system or world are necessarily trying to exploit the creation of God. They must be subjected to reactions which are perceived by the conditioned souls as miserable and joyful. In fact, the entire material way of life is a fiasco when seen from the perspective of absolute bliss. In the battle with Krishna, I and my 23 armies lost 17 times, only once did I defeat him. Jarasandha offers his own life as an example of the inevitable happiness and distress of this material world. But still, I never lament or rejoice, because I know this world is driven by time and fate. Having started that the Supreme Lord controls this world, Jarasandha explains the specific method of control. It should be remembered that in the Vedic context of Kala or time does not refer merely to a system of measuring planetary movements such as days, weeks, months, and years, but rather to the way things are being moved. Everything is moving according to its destiny, and this destiny is also described as time, since everyone's destiny is revealed and imposed by the movements of the time. And now all of us great commanders of military leaders have been defeated by the Yadus and their small entourage who are protected by Krishna. Now our enemies have conquered because time favors them. But in the future, when time is auspicious for us, we will conquer. Shuka Maharshi said, thus persuaded by his friend Shishupala, took his followers and went back to his capital. The surviving warriors also returned to their respective cities. Powerful Rukmini, however, was especially envious of Krishna. He could not bear the fact that Krishna had carried off his sister to marry her in Rakshasa style. Thus he persuaded the Lord with an entire military division. Frustrated and enraged, mighty armed Rukmini, dressed in armor and wielding his arrow, had sworn before all the kings, I shall not enter Kundinipura if I do not kill Krishna in battle and bring Rukmini back with me. I swear this to you. Rukmini spoke these angry words and then set off to pursue Lord Krishna, as described in the following verses. Having said this, he had mounted his chariot and told his charioteer, drive the horses quickly to where Krishna is. He and I must fight. This wicked-minded coward boy, infatuated with his prowess, has violently abducted my sister. But today I will remove his pride with my sharp arrows. Srila Sridhara Swami explains that Gopalasya actually means of the protector of the Vedas, where Durmathe means of him whose beautiful mind is compassionate even toward the wicked. Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti adds that the real meaning of what Rukmini said is that today, fighting with Lord Krishna, Rukmini would relieve himself of his presentations to bring a great hero. Boasting thus, foolish Rukmini, ignorant of the true extent of the Supreme Lord's power, approached Lord Govinda in his lone chariot and challenged him. Just stand and fight, he told Krishna. It appears from these verses that though Rukmini set out with an entire military division, he personally rushed up to Lord Krishna to fight with him. Rukmini drew his bow with a great strength and struck Lord Krishna with 3 arrows. Then he said, stand here for a moment, O defiler of the Yadu dynasty. Wherever you go, carrying off my sister like a crow stealing a sacrificial butter, I will follow. This very day I shall relieve you of your false pride. You fool, you deceiver, you cheater in a battle. In his historical attack, Rukmini displays the very qualities he attributes to Lord Krishna. Every living being is part and parcel of the Lord, and belongs to the Lord. Therefore, Rukmini was like a crow trying to steal the sacrificial offering meant for the enjoyment of the Lord. Release the girl before you are struck dead by my arrows and made to lie down. In response to this, Lord Krishna smiled, and with 6 arrows he struck Rukmini and broke his bow. Lord Krishna smiled, and with 6 arrows he struck Rukmini and broke his bow. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti points out that in fact Lord Krishna was meant to lie down together with Rukmini on a beautiful bed of flowers, but out of shyness Rukmini did not directly mention this point. The Lord struck Rukmini's 4 horses with 8 arrows, his chariot driver with 2, and the chariot's flag with 3. Rukmini grabbed another bow and struck Lord Krishna with his 5 arrows. Although hit by these many arrows, Lord Achyuta again broke Rukmini's bow. Rukmini picked up at another bow, but the infallible Lord broke that one to pieces as well. Iron bludgeon, 3-pointed spear, sword and shield, pike, javelin, whatever weapon Rukmini picked up, Lord Hari smashed it to its bits. Then Rukmini leaped down from his chariot and sword in the hand, rushed furiously toward Krishna to kill him, like a bird flying into the wind. As Rukmini attacked him, the Lord shot arrows that broke Rukmini's sword and shield into small pieces. Krishna then took up his own sharp sword and prepared to kill Rukmini. At that stage, Rukmini requested not to kill. Seeing Lord Krishna ready to kill her brother, saintly Rukmini was filled with alarm. She fell at her husband's feet and piteously spoke as follows. Rukmini said, O controller of all mystic power, immeasurable one, Lord of lords, master of the universe, O all auspicious and mighty armed one, please do not kill my brother. Rukmini's utter fear caused her limbs to tremble and her mouth to dry up, while her throat choked up out of her sorrow, and in her agitation, her golden necklace scattered. She grasped Krishna's feet, and the Lord, feeling compassionate, desisted. Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti quotes the worldly rule that one's sister is the personification of mercy, Dayaya Bhagini Murtihi. Even though Rukmini was wicked and was opposed to his sister's best interest, Rukmini was compassionate toward him, and the Lord shared his compassion. Lord Krishna tied up the evil doer with a strip of cloth. He then proceeded to disfigure Rukmini by comically shaving him, leaving parts of his mustache and hair. By that time, Yadu heroes had crushed the extraordinary army of their own opponents, just as elephant crushed a lotus flower. Lord Krishna used his same sharp sword to give the wicked Rukmini a peculiar haircut. As the Yadus approached Lord Krishna, they saw Rukmini in this sorry condition, practically dying of shame. When the all-powerful Lord Balarama saw Rukmini, he compassionately released him and spoke the following to Lord Krishna. Lord Balarama said to Krishna, My dear Krishna, you have acted improperly. This deed will bring shame on us. For to disfigure a close relative by shaving off his mustache and hair is as good as killing them. Omniscient Balarama knew that Rukmini was the guilty party, but to encourage the lamenting Rukmini, he decided to gently approach Sri Krishna. Omniscient Balarama knew that Rukmini was the guilty party, but to encourage the lamenting Rukmini, he decided to gently approach Sri Krishna. Saintly lady, please do not displeased with us out of anxiety for your brother's disfigurement. No one but oneself is responsible for one's joy and grief, for a man experiences the result of his own deeds. Again addressing Krishna, Balarama said, a relative should not be killed even if his wrongdoing warrants a capital punishment. Rather, he should be thrown out of the family since he has already been killed by his own sin. Why kill him again? To further encourage Lady Rukmini, Balarama again emphasizes that Krishna should not humiliate Rukmini anymore. Turning to Rukmini, Balarama continued the code of sacred duty for warriors established by Lord Brahma enjoins that one may have to kill even his own brother. That is indeed a most dreadful law. Lord Balarama, in the interest of fairness, is giving complete analysis of the situation. Although one should not kill a relative, there are extenuating circumstances according to military codes in the American Civil War, which took place in 1860. Many families were divided between the army of the North and the South, and thus fratricidal killing, unfortunately, became a common affair. Such killing is certainly Gorathama, most dreadful, and such is the nature of material world, where duty, honor, and so-called justice often create conflict. Only on the spiritual platform, in pure Krishna consciousness, can we transcend the unacceptable pain of material existence. Rukmi was maddened by pride and envy, and thus could not understand anything about Krishna and Krishna consciousness. Again, Balarama addressed Krishna, blinded by conceit with their personal opulences. Proud men offended others for the sake of such things as kingdom, land, wealth, woman, honor, and power. Lord Krishna was originally meant to marry Rukmini. All along, this was the best arrangement for all concerned. And yet, from the beginning, Rukmini had maliciously opposed this beautiful arrangement. When his sister's desire was finally fulfilled and she was taken by Krishna, he viciously attacked the Lord with vulgar insults and mortal weapons. In return, Lord Krishna tied him up and partially clipped his hair and mustache. While certainly humiliating for the puffed up prince like Rukmini, his punishment was mere slap on the wrist, considering what he had done. To Rukmini, Balarama said, "Your attitude is unfair, for like an ignorant person, you wish good to those who are inimical to all living beings and who have done evil to your true well-wishers." The Supreme Lord's Maya makes men forget their real selves, and thus taking the body for the self, they consider others to be friends, enemies, or neutral parties. Those who are bewildered perceive the one Supreme Soul who resides in all embodied beings, as many just as one may perceive the light in the sky or the sky itself as many. The Lord as the Super Soul pervades all things, just as fire pervades wood, and so he appears to be of many varieties, though he is the absolute one without a second. This material body, which has a beginning and an end, is composed of the physical elements, the senses, and the modes of nature. The body imposed on the self by material ignorance causes one to experience the cycle of birth and death. The material body, composed of various material qualities, elements, and so on, attracts and repels the conditioned soul and thus entangles him in the material existence. Because of our attraction and repulsion for our own body and other bodies, we establish temporary relationship, dedicate ourselves to great endeavors and sacrifices, concoct imaginary religions, make noble speeches, and thoroughly involve ourselves in material illusion. As Shakespeare said, all the world stage, beyond the somewhat absurd, thereafter of material existence, is the real and meaningful world of Krishna consciousness, the liberated life of pure souls devoted in loving service to the Supreme Lord. O intelligent lady, the soul never undergoes contact with or separation from insubstantial material objects, because the soul is their very origin and illuminator. Thus the soul resembles the sun, and which neither comes in contact with nor separates from the sense of sight and what is seen. As explained in the previous text, the conditioned soul ignorantly assumes himself to be the material body. Birth and other transformations are undergone by the body but never by the self, just as change occurs for the moon's phases but never for the moon, though the new moon they may be called the moon's end. Lord Balarama here explains how the conditioned souls identify with the body and how this identification should be given up. Certainly, every ordinary person considers himself or herself young, middle-aged, or old, healthy, or sick. But such identification is an illusion, just as the waxing and waning of the moon is an illusion. When we identify ourselves with the material body, we lose our power to understand the soul. As a sleeping person perceives himself, the objects of sense enjoyment and the fruits of his acts within the illusion of a dream. So, one who is unintelligent undergoes material existence. Therefore, with transcendental knowledge, dispel the grief that is weakening and confounding your mind. Please resume your natural mood, O Princess of pristine smile. Lord Balarama reminds Srimati Rukmini that she is the eternal goddess of fortune, performing pastimes with the Lord in this world and should thus give up her so-called grief. Shuka Maharshi said, thus enlightened by Lord Balarama, slender Rukmini forget her depression and steadied her mind by spiritual intelligence. Left with only his life air cast out of his enemies, he deprived of his strength and bodily radiance. Rukmini could not forget how he had been disfigured. In frustration, he constructed for his residence a large city which he called Bhojakata. Because he had promised, I will not re-enter Kundanapura until I have killed wicked Krishna and brought back my younger sister. In a mood of angry frustration, Rukmini took up residence at that very place. Thus defeating all the opposing kings, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, brought the daughter of Bhishmaka to his capital, Dwaraka, and married her according to the Vedic injunctions, O protector of the Kurus. At that time, O king, there was a great rejoicing in all the homes of Yadupuri, whose citizens loved only Krishna, chief of the Yadus. All the men and women, full of joy and adored with shining jewels and earrings, brought wedding presents, which they reverently offered to the exquisitely dressed groom and bride, Lord Krishna and Rukmini. The city of Vrishnis appeared most beautiful. There were tall festive columns and also archways decorated with flower garlands, cloth banners, and precious gems, arrangements of auspicious, full of water pots. A guru ascended, incense and lamps graced every doorway. That is the Dwarakapuri. The city's streets were cleansed by the intoxicated elephants belonging to the beloved kings who were guests at the weddings, and these elephants further enhanced the beauty of the city by placing trunks of plantain and betel nut trees in all the doorways. Those who have belonged to the royal families of the Kuru, Sanjaya, Kaikeya, Vidharba, Yadu, and Kunti clans joyfully met one another in the midst of the crowds of people excitedly running here and there. The kings and their daughters were totally astonished to hear the story of Rukmini's abduction, which was being glorified in song everywhere. Dwaraka's citizens were overjoyed to see Krishna, the Lord of all opulence, united with Rukmini, the goddess of fortune. Thus ends the chapter. Thus ends the 54th chapter. Iti Srimad Bhagavate Mahapurane Paramahamsam Samhitayam Dashamaskande Uttararde Rukmini Dvahotsava Nama Chatu Panchasahotodhyayaha. So 54th chapter finished, and We are going to 55th chapter tomorrow. Dwaraka citizens were very overjoyed to see Krishna and Rukmini. Lord Krishna and Rukmini got married in Dwaraka palace. Om Namostu Anantaye Sahasramurtaye Sahasrapadakshara Sahasranamne Purushashtaye Sahasrakoti Yugarane Namaha Sahasrakoti Yugarane Namaha Akashat Paritam Medagit Sagaram Sarvadeva Namaskaraha Sri Kesham Prijatyo Namaha Sarva Vedeshat Punyam Sarva Tirteshu Yatpalam Tatpalam Pramapti Vasanat Vasnevasya Vashtante Jayatrayam Sarvabhut Nivase Vasdevrute Kayana Vacha Manasendriyarva Buddhatmanama Prakrute Sabhavat Karomi Yadyat Sagalam Parasmai Narayanaye Samarpayami Narayanaye Samarpayami Narayanaye Samarpayami Hari Om.